Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Kneon. I am going to do an update on DC Comics Future State 5G, whatever the hell we're calling it, because apparently they're going to offer returnability on these books. Because I have a feeling that a lot of these books are probably going to be returned. I mean, let's be honest. Before we get into the video, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants. We're at almost 150,000 subs. Thanks for the support, guys. We're going to talk about 5G. We're going to talk about Future State. We're going to talk about DC Comics sort of taking a harder left turn into activism and what this might mean for the company going forward. Talk a little bit, muse a little bit about where DC Comics might go from here if DC Comics is even allowed to survive. Remember, Warner Media is going to be laying off like thousands of people in the very near future. They already gutted DC Comics, and I mean, let's be honest, in 2020, you really don't need a comic book publisher, do you? If your business model is TV shows, movies, video games, you don't need to publish comic books anymore. So we'll see how long DC Comics is allowed to last, and we'll see what kind of a state it's in when the end finally comes, whenever that is. But I want to pull this article up because I thought it was really interesting that Jim Lee was denying that there was a 5G reboot coming. And I guess it's just semantics, because technically this isn't a reboot. It's like a 2 or 3 month event. It seems to be kind of a placeholder for another DC Comics reboot. I'll talk a little bit about that. But yeah, it's very interesting to see the about face that some of these media outlets have had to do. I know Bleeding Cool had to run an article talking about how they were right about 5G. I know that Ethan Van Sciver has been talking about 5G for quite some time, for like a year, I think, a year and a half, and he was right. It is happening. It's maybe not happening quite the way that Dan DiDio had it worked out, but we're seeing pieces of it with Future State. Now, I was on Yellow Flash's live stream last night. Geeky and I were on for a little bit. Anyway, we popped in and we talked a little bit about the Future State initiative, whatever this actually is, mini event. And it does seem like it is a placeholder. It seems like DC Comics was hit with a bunch of layoffs. They didn't know exactly what to do, but they'd already put a bunch of work into Dan DiDio's 5G, so they just kind of like are just throwing it against the wall to see what happens. But it's already getting, a considerable amount of pushback from people in the comic book community who are like, here we go again, another event, here we go again. Let's swap out all the main DC Comics heroes for a bunch of brand new heroes that just happen to tick all the right check boxes. And it is a very politically correct version of the DC universe, and it could have something to do with the guy that's in charge of DC now. Now, granted, this was started under Dan DiDio, but they brought in Activision Blizzard's Daniel Cherry. He is the general manager of DC Comics. Okay, cool. He's also an activist. He actually says right in his bio on Twitter that he is a social activist from Blizzard, and he's running DC Comics. So yes, this is what DC Comics is going to be going forward. We're going to have initiatives like this. We're going to have the young adult graphic novels being crazy political, like that Wonder Woman of History. I mean, it was all modern celebrities and Democratic political candidates or politicians in office, and that is exactly what we're going to see from DC Comics. It's basically become blue water, I guess at this point. I don't know. Now, the thing about this situation, and maybe they were actually reading the room for a change. Maybe DC Comics was reading the room for a change, but they're going to make the books returnable. According to Bleeding Cool, DC Comics will make all their 5G Future State comics returnable. Let's see, Rich Johnson writes, right now, Image Comics, Boom, IDW, and Dynamite are extending their returnable offerings to comic book stores, allowing retailers to order their books in confidence, able to return them if they don't sell. Of course, those are the comic shops that are allowed to stay open. which is the kind of things that the comic book direct market was not meant to do. That's true, it wasn't. The direct market was basically you bought the books, you were stuck with the books, unlike the newsstands where you could return the books. I think you had to rip the cover off or something. Other publishers like Vault make specific titles returnable, often on launch. This was especially notable for publishers coming out of shutdown, trying to support a market who were unsure as to what readers would be buying, or if they would be buying comic books. It might be technically possible for retailers to order tons of comics and send them all back. There are costs in terms of shipping, administration, workload, etc. So in reality, retailers are persuaded not to order conservatively and in practice only return a few. Marvel and DC have been resistant to such returnability practices at the moment. Marvel have never been keen on returnability, and DC, well, yeah, because it looks bad for Disney, right? Disney doesn't want you to send. Disney, once you spend the money, you spend the money. They do not like to give money back. Ask anyone who's tried to get refunds at their theme parks. You know, they don't like to part with the money. And DC restricts it to specific launches. Once in a while, when DC Comics goes for a big line-wide launch, like the New 52, or the months where everything gets renamed for giggles, they have been known to go all out. And that's what they'll be doing for Future State. DC told retailers all Future State titles will be solicited with full returnability throughout the 2-month event, which should help numbers and hopefully profits, as long as not too many are returned. Well, I don't know, guys. When you swap out the entire main line of the DC universe, and people are looking at it and they're like, is this an organic change, or is this just for shock and woke points? There's a very good chance that people are going to be returning these books. This is a big test for UCS comic distributors and Lunar. Can they handle the big returns as well as distributing the comic books? What sort of state will they be in the future? What state will any of us be in? Who the hell knows? I mean, we talked about this last night on Yellow Flash's stream, and it does seem like this is the last ditch effort for DC to try to turn things around before they go all in on whatever Daniel Cherry's idea is for DC Comics. And I think it looks more like YA graphic novels from here on out. Judging by the people they cut, judging by the people they're keeping, it looks like it's going to be more general audience stuff, potential Hollywood pitches. And I want to talk about that because that is sort of what I'm seeing with the Future State event is that it's mostly people from Hollywood and movies and animation coming into comics again. But I think some of these people have been displaced in other parts of Warner Brothers because of the shutdown. They can't work in live action, so they're coming into comic books. And I think it's with the intention of trying to get these characters off the ground so they can turn them into TV shows or games or something. I mean, that's all that comics are now. They're basically a proof of concept for Hollywood, and that's all Warner Media looks at this company as is an IP farm, proof of concept. So what's going to happen? Are they going to push out, and this was brought up on the stream last night, are they going to push out the regular writers? Probably. Because honestly, if DC Comics has the option of working with TV people or movie people, or some rando from Tumblr, they're going to take the person with the name attached. Now, sometimes it backfires. Marvel, it kind of backfired with J.J. Abrams and his son. They got to jump to the head of the line, and they got their own Spider-Man #1. And ironically enough, Todd McFarlane's Spawn 300 outsold J.J. Abrams' all-star celebrity Spider-Man #1. So sometimes comic book readers reject it. I think in this case, they want to make sure that the Hollywood people are involved in it because these are characters they're creating, hoping that they will stick, hoping that they can turn them into TV shows and movies and video games in the future. I think they're hoping that they're going to get a bunch of, Miles Morales characters out of it, that something is going to stick. But will it? Who the hell knows? Now, what's interesting is that there's a bit of a controversy going on in the animation industry right now because a lot of live action Hollywood people are pushing their way into animation because animated productions have not shut down, not as much as the live action production. So I kind of wonder if some of the people jumping to comics were displaced from the animation industry. So we've got live action people pushing into animation, and then the animation people are getting relegated to comic books because they can't get work in animation now, because we've got all of these out of work TV show writers coming into animation, because it's just so easy. It's so easy, you know. But if there's any doubt at all, and we're going to talk about this, hopefully I'll get Geeky on for a video about the state of Warner Media right now. If there's any doubt that DC Comics is going to go all in on politics, you know, beyond the fact that their new general manager is a very vocal social activist, beyond the fact that they're rebooting, even temporarily, the line with characters that are basically every checkbox you can possibly think of, they're working with Rise Against, a very political band, to do the Broken Dreams Inc. single for death metal. The music of Rise Against is at its best when it's telling a story, addressing the times in which we live, advocating for change and equality. With roots dating back nearly 90 years, DC Comics has mastered the art of storytelling within a comic. It made Rise Against a natural addition to the DC universe. They talk about their love for comic books or whatever. But yeah, it's a very political thing. This is what they're doing. This is what DC Comics is doing now. You know, but it's interesting. Michael B. Jordan is going to be supposedly producing a movie based on Static Shock, which could be a good thing, I guess. I don't know. I like Static Shock in the 90s, but yeah, so he's going to be producing that. People wanted us to do a video on it, because I've said before that I like Static Shock, but I didn't think it was really enough to do a whole video on it. But I'm kind of wondering what's going on with this 5G, because it looks like, or Future State rather, it looks like they have Wildstorm characters in there. It looks like they might have Milestone characters in there. I don't know. Guys. Is this like a Crisis on Infinite Hollywood IP, or what? You know, let's just like throw all these characters into a bucket. But of course, you know, we got a lot of books being canceled for this, so I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. The books are returnable. I think a lot of them are going to get returned. I don't think this is going to go that well. I could be wrong. Some of the character designs look kind of interesting, you know, but I just think this is a Hail Mary pass. This is probably going to be the last big push for DC Comics before it turns into something else entirely, which is going to be just YA graphic novels and IP form. That's what it's going to be. So, gonna wrap it up. Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, and we'll talk later.